So good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, John. Terrific to have you here with us at the GapSummit. It's really, actually, I think, very, very special because you sit above a whole range of things that are happening in our industry, right at the edges of its innovation and evolution. So really, really tremendous to have the time with you today. Thank you for joining us. What we'll do in this session is we'll have a bit of a discussion, you and I, for the next sort of 20-25 minutes. And then what we'll do based on that and based on the perspectives of the leaders of tomorrow is have an opportunity for them to ask their own questions to you and hopefully learn a little bit and get some advice from a leader as accomplished as yourself. So just to help that happen a little bit, why don't we just get started now? And I'd love to begin with your own personal journey, because BeiGene is an incredibly fascinating story, and we'd love to just know a little bit about how you helped create this organization, and if you could add some color maybe that we wouldn't find on, say, the internet or Wikipedia, that would be tremendous. So over to you, John.
Sure. Well, I guess I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it's a great place to grow up. But when I grew up there, the economy was really challenged. And, I can remember being a little boy and running through the streets and running in the woods across the street from my house with lots of other kids. And, I went through a process of making my first best friend. You'd read books, you'd hear stories about how great it was to have a friend. And I went through this process of starting to make my friends in life. And as I did this, very quickly, I got very close. And, this good friend of mine told me that he was moving. And his father had lost his job in Pittsburgh, and he was moving somewhere else. And I could see the stress in him. I could see it in his parents, who I knew. And a month or two later, they were gone. And I had a great loss there, and I was upset, and I made a new best friend, because children are, very able to overcome anything quickly. And we ran around in the woods and we had a great time and, threw a ball around. And pretty soon I found out that actually his father had lost his job and he was moving. And this repeated for me again thereafter. And it was really, took a toll on me. And I watched how it took a toll on their family. It was very, very stressful for everyone. And I lost friends. And I can remember being a little kid, laying in the bed in my house, dreaming as I went off to sleep about what if you could create a place where people could just work together and be friends, and they had a good job and the family was good and it was happy, and it could be positive for everybody, for the family, for the friends. And, I really envisioned it being on a little cul-de-sac. And I don't think I knew what the word meant at that time, but that was my image of it. And everyone lived next to each other and they all worked together, and it was a great place. And that was my dream. And I thought, how wonderful would this be? I can remember hearing about Bell Laboratories in the US, and that was a little bit like I was dreaming. And I thought, wow, I want to be a scientist and be in an environment like that. And I continued to grow up, and I went to MIT, I went to Stanford, I worked at McKinsey. I did a lot of entrepreneurial things to pay for, school, and I loved the business aspect. And I found myself deciding I want to create my own organization, which I think was true to this, childish, but, real dream that I had, that if you could create a job, what could be better than that? And as I got out of school, I began to do some entrepreneurial things. I worked in oncology, startup. I worked in a company that was doing mobile wireless. And at this time, I had 3 good friends that I skied with a lot from Stanford. And over a series of years, I lost all 3 of them. And it just devastated me. And I decided, I know what I want to do with my life. It's fight for life. This is it. I want to create jobs. I want to fight for life. I want to stop people's family from having to deal with this stuff I was going through. And it's absolutely what I want to do. And I decided my career will be entirely in life sciences. And I want to figure out how to make great impactful medicine that'll help people. I want to, create jobs, and I want to fight life for life. And that was what brought me to where I am as a person, and knowing very clearly this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do. It makes a lot of sense. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Thank you, John, for sharing that. And just an incredible story. And it's interesting how you anchor both sides of what you were saying in the notion of friendship. And that's not something that we hear very often. So at least in the business sense of the way people evolve in their careers and thinking. So thank you for sharing that. Very, very personal and very poignant. So just to think a little bit now about the organization you've created and the world in which it operates. And to describe that as a changing world would be an understatement, certainly. So given that fact, you and the company sit at the cross currents of some incredible opportunities and challenges, and not least from your vantage point in China. What reflections, John, do you have for the leaders of tomorrow based on what you are seeing, given all of the different perspectives that you have as the leader of BeiGene?
Sure. Well, I think that, I always try to think about what I'm doing and what's going on in the industry. I think I had this clarity on what I wanted to do, but I looked at the industry really from where is it going? And I think you're asked to think about strategy. You're taught to look for changes and look for opportunities. And I think in developing medicines, I really saw this, once in a lifetime opportunity set that you're taught to look for. And I just was, wow, it's where I am. And I think the fundamental issue in the industry to me was not, does science work? It was beginning to work well. Actually, at the time we got going, it was still in question, but I believed it worked. And the things that were clearly the big issue was how you affordably develop a medicine. You hear about it costs $1 billion to develop a medicine. That's a problem. And it takes 7 years. That's a problem. So the single biggest thing in our industry is how to be better at clinical trials. And 90% of the money, 90% of the time's there. The research we were becoming very good at, but nobody was really solving this problem. And I think as I realized that's the biggest problem, we also saw changes coming in China. And the changes coming from China at that time and in other places were enabling global clinical trials that could be used everywhere. They were also enabling more rapid regulatory approvals to start trials or to get approval. And that was big. And if you think about the biggest issue to solve, suddenly with all of the new incidences of cancer in China, it was probably double the number of potential patients from all the places we ran trials in the past. But no one had built that capability deeply, that skill set. So we decided to, skate there ahead of other people and, build a capability we thought would be valuable in the new world. I think we also believed as China started to reimburse medicines, they were going to have to do it only at a lower price point. And when you have half the people that have cancer, in the world where you're now getting approvals and running clinical trials, it has to be at a lower price point. And this would create a huge amount of reimbursement, but at a different price point. That's a restructuring event. Are we going to continue to be medicine for the very wealthiest, 1.5 billion people in the world? Or are we going to start moving to getting these medicines before they could become generic years later to the rest of the world and have them help pay for them, but at a very different price point? I believe in the second. I believe that there is a robust model that has been enabled by these changes where medicine everywhere can be much more affordable than it's been before. And this is because if you reduce the upfront costs dramatically, which I think you can now, and if you are able to set a lower price point that enables countries all over the world, not just the traditional countries that have got innovative medicine in a timely fashion, you suddenly have several times the number of patients paying for medicine. You have a much lower upfront cost, and the variable cost of medicine is small. very small. So suddenly you have a complete tipping point where the industry is very different than it was before. Little companies can become big companies. Everything needs to be rethought and changed. It's so exciting. And so we jumped into that, trying to build the organization that we're in the beginnings of. We're just in the early stages. But BeiGene, which is really trying to build affordable, discover and bring affordable medicine to billions more patients around the world. And I think that this truly is the future. I think it has profound indications for drug and medicine development. But I think more than that, it means that affordable medicines are going to be coming to these markets all throughout the world much more quickly. And that creates the need for new infrastructure, all sorts of other opportunities all around the globe.
Thanks, John. I mean, it's just so interesting to hear that perspective, because traditionally in industry, we've had this dichotomy, of course, of innovative medicines. They stay in the market for 8 to 10 years. Then there's a price cliff, that's generics. And what you're describing is something obviously much more disruptive in the encouraging sense of being able to be both innovative and affordable. So thank you for that perspective. That makes it has real, I think, profound consequences for all of our leaders going forward. So one of the things that future leaders of tomorrow will be very interested in are your perspectives on innovation. And innovation and collaboration, as we know, are the engines of modern science. But in one sense, they can sometimes be in tension. And how have you known at BeiGene when to drive things on your own versus when to partner with others?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that for us, it's very simple. I think that, we want to fight cancer everywhere across the globe. And I think that, one of our standing principles is, how do we make sure that all the medicines we're developing are clearly impactful? And then how do we get them to as many patients as we can? Sometimes that answer is very straightforward and it's internal. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes we aren't the best organization to get from point A to point B. And we try to understand ways that we could work with other organizations to do that. We have a deep collaboration, for example, with the American biotech Amgen. It's the 5th largest biopharmaceutical company in the world. And in that collaboration, they're working with us where we're helping them accelerate their global clinical trials because we can help them do that. We're also helping them in China to launch their products because we're good at that and we can help them do that. From the other perspective, around how we're going to pursue the design of those trials, that's something that from a global point of view, they have a much broader global commercial perspective than we do. So they've, clearly are adding a lot of value in that area that's, different and complementary to what we could. So we try to look at every situation in a different and a unique fashion. And we try to find ways to really leverage our strengths and leverage our partners' strengths. And, I think the other thing in collaboration, which isn't about what you aspire to do, it's how you do it. I think we have a philosophy that says, whatever you're doing in any partnership, whether it's business or it's family, you always see 100% of what you put in and you only see 20% of what the other partner puts in. So you always have to be in a situation when you're in a relationship where you as an organization or as a person are committed to, I'm happy to put in 80% of the effort and get 20% of the value. If you don't have that philosophy, you're always going to be disappointed. And I think that we have that culture, and the collaborations we have work so well because when the other side sees that that's your attitude, I think they embrace it too. And, I think it's enabled us to be a very effective collaboration partner. And the only way to fight cancer is with as many people on your side as you can, as many organizations.
Thank you, John. That makes so much sense. Now, it would be great, John, to talk just a little bit more about BeiGene itself. And if you could tell us a little bit about what BeiGene does that is different, because there are things that you do differently to the way most other pharma companies operate. I think that would be just great for the audience to hear a bit more about.
Sure. Well, I think that, we're an organization that, from the beginning decided the only way to be successful in the new world in our industry was to be global. But in being global, we decided to be headquarterless. So we're an anchored global but headquarterless company. And by that, I mean, for years, we've actually been saying our headquarters are Zoom. We have a management team that's all over the world, and it understands the local situations in which we're operating because it's not in, Cambridge, Massachusetts, or in London, or in Beijing, or in San Francisco. It's everywhere and nowhere. And I think when you do that, no one's a second-class citizen. Everyone understands they're part of the company. And I think we felt that was important. And it also sends a sign that anywhere you are in the world, you can sit in any seat in this company. And I think that's important from a growth perspective in the organization. Still, people fly all over the place. Still, they rotate around to other, offices to work there, and they change roles and responsibilities. But I think fundamentally, this is very different for a life sciences company and highly unusual. And I think it's worked. By the way, it's not easy, but it works. And we have a culture that, I hope and we strive that anyone anywhere in the world can feel comfortable to be in. It's not American, it's not European, it's not Chinese. It's a global culture, I hope and I believe. I think we also believe that you've got to empower people. And, success is about putting brilliant people together and trying to have the process you need to be organized, but not process that makes you focused on process and not on results. So we have a very passionate, energetic, highly talented, team and culture here. And we do have a belief that anything is possible. And we very much like to say, I hope that my legacy in the company is, a lot of things that the world thinks are impossible are really doable by a highly talented, energetic, passionate team. And we do believe that. And I think our track record, speaks for itself.
That's wonderful, especially as I think many people remain anxious in the current environment that we're in. If we don't have a physical footprint, how can we be successful? I think you obviously are a shining example of how you can do that and more. So thank you very much for your views on that. So John, just one more question before we open it up to the floor, and it's one that I'm certainly personally very, very interested to get your perspectives on. The life of the 21st century CEO is multi-time zone. It's mixed in with too much information, hundreds, if not thousands of requests for your time and extremely complex topics that require you to navigate. So how do you individually try to get balance then? And how do you manage all of these different competing demands on your time?
Well, for starters, I have a great cappuccino maker. That's very helpful. Very important requirement. I think that the most important thing to me, as you think about how you balance, I think that, you have to do something you love. If you don't do something you love, whether you have balance or not, if you're not passionate about it, if you don't care, you're not going to find that joy in your life that you should. So I think you want to find something you have a true passion. I think the second thing is when you think about balance, there's balancing on a daily basis. Every day I work exactly this much and I have this much time. There's balancing on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, on a 5-year basis, on a work-life basis. I know people who work really hard and retired at 35. So, I think for all of us, we have to realize you have to pick where you are in your life and what fits for your life. That probably isn't determined by you. It's probably determined by your family and by your friends and the other things, the situation around you, what's going on in the world. And I think that you pick the right way to balance, but you always need to balance. I think the second thing is, to me, I love what I do, but part of the reason I'm doing it is I want to have friends. And by the way, the most important thing to me in the world is family. And I definitely want to have family. And, people in my company even before COVID, when my daughter's on Zoom all the time, I'm shocked she's not here right now, but she's taking a class. But, on that basis, like, I work very hard, but I find a way to spend a tremendous time, with her and her mom, and they're present in my life. And most people that interact with me a lot in the company wind up seeing them and interacting with them a lot. And that's okay. We're human. Everyone knows we're human. And I think, this is the second part. Leadership isn't about being a vaunted CEO here, or, the person who's always right and knows all the answers. I think it's really about being someone people trust and that they can relate to, and that, they want to work with. And I think that there's many times when I'm wrong. And there's several times when I've done something or said something that's embarrassing. And, when these things happen, I just laugh at myself. I admit I'm wrong, and you move on. When in our company, we get really hard questions, but we take a company meeting, we'll take any question and we'll answer questions until, the last person decides to leave or hang up, because, we want to be as honest as we can with people. And we admit that we're human, and we admit that the organization's imperfect, and that's okay. And I think that, really builds a sense of honesty and camaraderie in a team that's trying to do something really hard. And I think that's one thing that when you're young and you're getting into, your career, you should remember, it's okay to be human. It's actually the best thing in the world to be human. So I think we try to embrace that and build a culture where that's okay and that's acceptable. And, we're not perfect, but we're honest. And, we try to move on no matter what happens and just succeed.
Thank you so much, John. And thank you for the reminder to be human, by the way, before we open it up to the floor. That's easily forgotten. And it's obvious in all of the discussion that we've just had that that's how you view things. So really, really appreciate you taking the time. But the good news for our leaders of tomorrow is that we have a bit more time together. And why don't we now start opening it up to questions, and I'll have a bit of a look through of what questions are coming up. But thank you, John.
Thank you.